It's
Ready.
nice to see you.
It's great to see you here in the Bronx.
You know,
Welcome.
here in the Bronx, you're back in New York. When you looked at the calendar 8 months ago and saw April 19th, could you have imagined back then that this would be anything but a finish line and it's kind of turned into a firewall?
You know, Matt, I said from the very beginning, this is going to be a tough contest all the way through. And I did it because I remember '08. You know, I went the distance with then Senator Obama. And that's the way primaries develop. Whoever it is that is going to, you know, make it through the preliminaries, the debates, the early contests, you're going to keep moving. And I said to everyone, you know, New York is going to be a place where I'm going to fight hard because I feel so strongly about it. But I never expected anything else.
But it means so much more right now because you have lost 7 of the last 8 contests. And you can tell how much is at stake because the exchanges between you and Senator Sanders are heating up. You talked about him, and someone asked you, was he ready to be president? You said, I think he hadn't done his homework. I think he'd been talking for more than a year about things he obviously hadn't really studied or understood. Do you think in some ways that Senator Sanders proposed some things early in this campaign that he didn't think he would stick around long enough to actually have to defend?
Well, you'll have to ask him, but what I was referring to there was the very long interview that he did with the New York Daily News. And I think a lot of people were quite taken aback that on key issues that he has been promoting during the entire campaign.
Breaking up banks.
Breaking up banks, foreign policy issues, that he did have some questionable answers. And look, that's fair game. Yeah, I've been in the bright, hot spotlight for a long time. I understand how that works. But I feel good about where the campaign is. We have a big popular vote lead, about 2.5 million over Senator Sanders. We have a significant delegate lead, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter.
He heard what you said. Whether you intended it to be cutting or biting or not, he said this about you in terms of whether you're qualified to be president. And I know you've heard this. I don't think you're qualified if you get $15 million from Wall Street sent through your super PAC. Now I'm paraphrasing. I don't think you're qualified if you voted for the disastrous war in Iraq and if you support trade agreements that cost millions of jobs to Americans. You don't have to read between the lines there. He said, came right out and said, he doesn't think you're qualified to be president.
Well, that'll be up to the voters of New York and the other states that will be passing judgment in the weeks ahead. I think it's kind of a silly statement, but he's free to say whatever he chooses.
Is he qualified to be president?
Well, here's what I believe. I believe that voters will be looking at both of us, but I will take Bernie Sanders over Donald Trump or Ted Cruz anytime. They pose real threats to our values, to groups of Americans, some very large groups like women, but so many people are hearing what's going on the Republican side and wondering, what is this about? How can we tolerate it?
I want to get to that, but has Senator Sanders, in your opinion, said or done anything during the course of this campaign or during the course of his career in the Senate that disqualifies him from being president of the United States?
I never said that about him.
I know, I'm asking.
I know, I never said that about him. His response to me was a misrepresentation of what I've said, but also kind of a historic amnesia, because on all of those issues, he supported President Obama, he supported Joe Biden as our vice presidential candidate, he supported John Kerry when he ran, and each one of them has, according to him, not been qualified. But I think in the heat of the campaign, people say lots of things. I want to stay focused on the issues. There are contrasts between us, and I think that's fair game.
Do you think some of the proposals that Senator Sanders has put forward are as realistic or unrealistic as some of the proposals that Donald Trump has put forward? How would you compare the two?
Well, as I said, I would take Bernie Sanders over Donald Trump any day, all day. But I do think that in the course of the campaign, I have been drawing contrasts between my plans, which have been well thought out and presented, and I've told people how we would pay for them, who they would help, because I think when you run for president of the United States, you have to level with the American people. You have to tell them, okay, if you vote for me, here is what I'm going to try to do. what's so scary about Donald Trump is I think he's telling us that we ought to listen and take it seriously, because clearly he has very different ideas than what I think are right for the country.
Wisconsin was earlier in the week. I want to talk to you not about the results. I want to talk to you about some of the information that we received in exit polling. And some of these things keep repeating after certain contests. Bernie Sanders got 82% of the votes from people under the age of 30. 89% of people said they thought Bernie Sanders was basically honest. 58% said that about you. And this struck me. You are running to become perhaps an historic candidate.
Yes,
perhaps
yes,
the first
right.
woman to be elected president.
Right.
And right now, if you look at Wisconsin, you basically split the women's vote with Senator Sanders. When you lay in bed at night, how do you get your arms around that?
I just think about it from a much broader perspective. I lost Wisconsin to Senator Obama by an even bigger margin, and I knew that I would have a tough fight going in. I actually came out very pleased with the number of delegates I got, and I am absolutely confident, Matt, that if I'm so fortunate as to secure the Democratic nomination, we will unify the Democratic Party, all parts of it. And I know that young people have been really caught up in Senator Sanders' campaign, and I think that's terrific, because the more young people we can bring into the process, particularly into the Democratic primary process, the better. The better
will
for our
those
party.
young people switch over to you,
Oh,
Senator
absolutely.
Secretary Clinton? That's a lot of people who are in his camp.
Well, but there were a lot of people in my camp in 2008. In fact, I think it's fair to say I got more of the popular vote, although I lost the delegates. So when I dropped out, I had a lot of work to do to persuade my supporters, who had gone to the very end with me, to switch their support to Senator Obama. I endorsed him. I nominated him at the convention.
Are you confident Senator Sanders will do that same thing?
Well, I'm certainly hoping, because we have to unify the Democratic Party to take on the threats from the Republicans.
You mentioned Donald Trump. In your long career in politics, not just Donald Trump, but have you ever seen anything even close to what's going on in the Republican Party right now, which is basically a civil war?
I haven't seen it at the presidential level. If you just look back through history, there have been all kinds of conflicts within parties, and the Whigs disappeared and the Republicans emerged. We do have a history of changing party and definition of who should or want to be in that party. But what's happening now is deeply distressing, not just to Republicans, who I hear from and who I see through the media trying to figure out what's going on. But remember, I think in my analysis, and I think it's fair, Donald Trump agrees with Republicans on many of the hot button issues. What he said about abortion, for example, his absolute insulting action toward immigrants, calling them rapists and criminals. He is expressing, maybe in more colorful language, what Republicans believe.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you said. Right. The comment he made about punishing women who seek abortions is not something that mainstream Republicans agree with at all.
But they want to make it illegal. They want to make it illegal.
They don't want to punish the woman.
Well, but it's just one step. If you make something illegal, what are the consequences for that illegality? So it's really just a half a step away from what they've been saying for some time.
Generally speaking, if you have a situation that's going on in the GOP right now, where there is this civil war, and it could get worse at the convention in Cleveland this summer, Democrats would be licking their chops, saying, let's polish up our candidate, let's get her perhaps ready for the general election. And yet they can't lick their chops yet, because you can't shake Bernie Sanders.
But that's the way it always is. When my husband in 1992 secured the Democratic nomination, it was in California. He lost a lot of the spring contests, and I remember, because we were hearing exactly the same kinds of questions, like, it's over, you'll never make it. And when he finally secured the nomination, he was running third behind then President George H.W. Bush and a potential candidacy of Ross Perot. This is the give and take, the movements that I am very familiar with. So I don't have any doubts. I don't have any concerns. We're going to win the nomination, and then we're going to unify the Democratic Party, and then we're going to take on whoever the Republicans end up nominating.
In all honesty, though, when Bernie Sanders declared that he was running for president, guy who finds himself as a democratic socialist, wants huge tax increases, has a mixed record on guns, did you seriously think that he would still be hanging around in the middle of April?
I knew somebody would. I didn't know who it would be, but it turned out to be Bernie because he has a very clear, passionate message about income inequality. I happen to share that, and I think what I've proposed will actually do more to begin the process of taxing the wealthy so they pay their share of America's economy and society, but also to have a lot of other issues. I want to break down all the barriers that stand in the way of Americans, and I think that's a big difference between my campaign and Senator Sanders, who has a very clear focus on a set of issues as opposed to how I see the problems.
Let me share some conversations I've had with Republicans. And if I say to somebody on the Republican side, aren't you nervous about what's happening with this campaign and this division and what might happen to the convention? Do you know what I hear a lot? They are clinging to the hope that the way they'll be able to deal with that is that at some point between now and the election, and they say this, that they will get to see Hillary Clinton in handcuffs.
Oh my
That there will
goodness.
be some kind of political perp walk based on your private email server.
Well, Matt, I know that they live in that world of fantasy and hope because they've got a mess on their hands on the Republican side. That is not going to happen. There is not even the remotest chance that it's going to happen. But look, they've been after me, as I say, for 25 years, and they have said things about me repeatedly that have been proven to be not only false, but kind of ridiculous.
But you're a lawyer. You're a lawyer.
Right.
So how do you see this ending? Do you think the FBI and the Justice Department write you a letter and say it was a misunderstanding? We're sorry, carry on?
Well, we're certainly going to carry on. I think it's a security review. It is a security review, and there are lots of those that are conducted in our government all the time, and you don't hear about most of them. You hear about this one because, you know, it does involve me, so that's why it gets so much attention. But I will tell you, sitting here in the Bronx, in this cafe, we're moving forward. The Republicans' fondest wishes will not be fulfilled.
While you're in the predicting mood, let me end on this, or two more. You're sitting here in New York.
Right.
Famously, back in 1969, a guy named Joe Namath made a bold prediction. He said, we will win the Super Bowl.
Right.
Will you declare right now, that guarantee me you will win the New York primary on April 19th?
Well, I never make predictions, but I'm feeling really good that that's going to happen. But we have a lot of work to do, and that's what I'm out here doing every single day.
Last one, I watched you walk up the sidewalk just now from the subway into this diner where we are in the Bronx. And what is, as someone who spent so much time in New York and will be spending so much time over the next 10 or 12 days in New York, what is the most New York thing that you would love to do that the Secret Service won't let you do?
Oh, well, I'm surprised they let me go on the subway and walk down the street, but they did. So I'm pressing the limits of what is going to be acceptable. I love to just get out and walk in New York. In neighborhoods, I was in Brooklyn the other day at Medgar Evers College and going to an event there, and we had to walk a couple of blocks, and I just said, we walked down tree line, beginning to blossom trees in Brooklyn, just walk down the street, people coming out of their houses. I love that. So it's really just being here, being in the environment, getting to spend time with people, shaking their hands, looking in their eyes, letting them ask me a question. That to me is New York politics, and I adore it.
Thanks for having a cup of tea with me.
It was great. Here's to you.
Here's to you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.